All right, hello, good morning, and welcome. This is chapter 1.1, the very first video in our algebra series, or excuse me, our algebra 2 series, covering through the Holt-McDougall curriculum. So, in chapter 1, we're going to be doing a little bit of looking at types of numbers, a lot of solving equations, solving inequalities, some basic algebra review stuff. Okay, so in this first section, it's going to be a little bit shorter. What we're looking at is the subsets of real numbers so that we can classify and order them. By the end of this video, you should be able to classify a number as one of its 5 types, either real, rational, integer, whole, or and irrational. And you'll also should be able to place numbers in the appropriate place on the number line. So let's go ahead and take a look at those definitions. So we've got the real numbers. And a real number, a real number is all numbers, okay? Everything. They include fractions, they include pi, they include irrational numbers, numbers that have decimal points that go on forever. They include everything, okay? So I want to kind of like draw this out as like a big box. Because we're gonna break this box up into parts depending on what is and isn't a number. So the first thing we're gonna do is break the real numbers into groups. Okay, the first group is gonna be the rational numbers, and the second group will be the irrational numbers. So this is the first way that we start breaking up these subsets of real numbers. Rational numbers include fractions, decimals, negative numbers, decimals, whole numbers, all kinds of things, right? The only thing they don't include is the irrational numbers. And the irrational numbers are things like the square root of 2, or anything where the decimal point never ends, right? If it keeps going, it never ends and it never repeats, that's irrational. So square root of 2 is irrational, pi is irrational, 14159 dot 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 dot. These are numbers where the decimal point doesn't end, so they're irrational. The square root of 4, however, goes over here in the rationals because the square root of 4 is 2, right? So we split the real numbers into rationals and irrationals. Now, the irrational numbers, they're kind of set over here, but the rational numbers, we're going to split these up as well. And so the next group that we're going to split these into is called the integers. And integers are all non-fraction. Non-fraction / non-decimal. So anything that isn't a fraction or a decimal is considered an integer. This includes negative numbers like -1, -2, -3, also positive numbers like 0, 1, 2, 3. All of those things are considered to be integers. As long as it's not a fraction, it's an integer. And then finally, the last group that we're going to break this down into are what are called the whole numbers. And the whole numbers are non-fraction and non-negative. So the negative numbers are integers. Everything else, and I should say zeros in here, all positive things that are non-fraction, non-negative, those are all considered to be whole numbers. Okay, so here's our 5 classifications that we're going to look at. The whole numbers, which are just non-fraction, non-negative, positive whole numbers. Integers are anything that's not a fraction or a decimal, so negatives and all of the whole numbers. Rational numbers are all things that we can create into a fraction or a decimal. That includes whole numbers. And the irrational numbers, which are all of these decimals that don't end. Notice that everything that is a whole number is also an integer, right? I drew that box inside of a box for a reason, because everything that is whole is integer, and everything that is integer is whole, or is rational, and everything that is rational is a real number. So there's some numbers that we can classify in all 5, or excuse me, in 4 different ways. So keep that in mind. Let's go on to ordering. Now here we have a bunch of numbers that are both whole, integer, irrational, rational, and real. They're all real numbers, and we're just saying can we put them on the number line? So we're gonna draw a number line first, and we're gonna put 0 in the middle, and we'll kind of go up 3 or 4. Looking at my numbers here, like that's -4, that's a 3, so I know that I've got to go at least 4 out when I make this. And we're just going to put them all onto their places. Now, the main thing here is that we need to recognize just how big these numbers are. So -5/4, how big is that? Well, one way we can tell is to give the decimal approximation of what that number is. So -5/4 is -1.25. That kind of helps us see where this goes in the number line, which means that's right there, right? So that's -5/4. What about √3? Well, we know that the square root of 4 is 2, so it's got to be less than 2. But I know that the square root of 1 is 1, so it's got to be bigger than 1. So it's somewhere in between 1 and 2, and it's a little bit closer to 2 than 1. So it's gonna go right about there, right? It's like 1 point. I think it's like 6 something something something. It's irrational, remember. So this is so now -0.2. That's already looking at as a decimal. I know that's negative. I know it's smaller than 0, but bigger than -1. Close to that, so it's going to go right about there. 7/10 we can convert to a decimal, which is 0.7, and that's going to be bigger than 0, smaller than 1, about right there. Pi is 3.14, so 3.14 gets me right about there. And then I got -1 right here, and -4 right there. Key thing being, if you're unsure what a number is in a certain form, like √3, what is it? Convert it to a decimal. You can use a calculator to do that so that it's easier to see where it falls on that number line. All right, last example here that we're going to do, looking at a table of the lowest elevations of the 6 continents. So here we have them. Africa, Asia, Australia, Europe, North America, and South America, and we want to order them from least to greatest. So notice that these are all negative numbers, and when we're talking about the least, and it's negative, we need to make sure that the least is the one that looks the biggest, has the biggest number, is the smallest when it's negative. So -156, -408, that is definitely, 408 is definitely the smallest. And then it looks like -156 is the next from there. And then let's see, we got 86, 40, 28, 16. So -86 is next. And then -40, -28, and -16. And that's what we're going to be covering from chapter 1.1. If you have questions, make sure to leave a comment, or you can leave a like on there, or contact me in some way. We will make sure that we can get that to help you out with that. All right. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you guys have a fabulous day. Bye.